Sebenarnya what we're doing now is preparing video clips for educational purposes, especially for Politeknik Malaysia, where there will be video and film course yang akan diadakan soon, maybe next year or something like that. Plus, this interview will be used by all media and also design students, from architecture to graphic design and that, because it constitutes under visual studies. So what we'll be saying here today will be a sort of inspiration and motivation to all students who are under the banner of visual studies. So hopefully you get a good 1 hour or 2 hour punya content. Okay, insyaAllah. Alright. Okay then, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So kita begin with a bit of history. Kalau boleh, a brief introduction of yourself, Pak Hassan first, and then Pak Yasmin, of yourself, your family, where you are from, siblings, and etc.
Me first. We're from Muar, but we've travelled along the way because my parents were transferred from here, there and everywhere. So they told me they would probably take a check out some stays. Lepas tu, I was sent to England at the age of 15, and I was there for 9 years. I hated every day, and half the time I was watching movies. I remember seeing Taxi Driver every day for about 6 days in a row. I didn't know why, and I didn't even know what Palm d'Or meant. I just thought this film was so mesmerizing. You know, Alice doesn't live here anymore. I saw also Scorsese. I thought Scorsese sounded some sausage, so I just saw his film without knowing anything about film. I knew I was fascinated by the story that was told. And I graduated in psychology from Newcastle. It's a completely useless degree, no matter what psychology students might tell you. It doesn't do anything for you. Tests your resilience, that's what degrees do, kan? They see that you got it. You got stamina, that's all. And then I worked in a computer company. In a bank before that for 2 weeks, computer company for a year. And then to advertising by accident. Everything that I've ever done or gotten into, I did by accident. I never had any ambition. Life's too short for that sort of thing. I think my only ambition is if I have a piece of paper or a job to do in front of me, I do it the best I can, and that's my ambition, to make this job the best I can. I learned much later that Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi used to say that while you're cleaning the toilet, it seems far more important than politics. I understand what he meant. When you're doing something, do the best you can, doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's halal.
Okay, thank you. Pak Hassan?
I was born in Alustar, Kedah, just a few houses away from where Dr. Mahathir lived. And my auntie and everybody, they were very poor. They went to his clinic free of charge. His sisters gave them money. So maybe a little bit of that maybe rubbed off on me, I don't know. Went over to the house on the other side. But I think my earliest memory is when I was 2 years old, fishing with my cousins on the river behind the house. So that was it for Alustar. Then we moved to Penang. So we were there for quite a long time until I came to Kuala Lumpur in 1964. So I was, I think, a failure in school, failure in the sense that I didn't make it like all the other guys. But I think looking back, probably I have done more things than all my friends who made it. And today I think they're very envious of me. One of them said so. I'm entirely self-taught in art and so on. I failed in art in school, and my art teacher said, don't take art next year. If I listen to my teacher, then I will not get anywhere. So anyway, film, I loved film when I was in secondary school, because we had these film shows every week, and I would never miss it, and I would be the guy who would be switching on and off the lights. I loved that. And some of these films stuck in my mind. So maybe, everything fell into place. But I had no ambition, didn't know what I was going to become. Similar,
doing a couple of bumps.
So today when I read all these motivational books, they say you must have this, you must have that. Is that so? I just did something that I loved. I tell my students, love what you do. It's going to take you where you are ultimately going to be. So I think that's very important to love what you do. But that will take you, carry you a long way lah. So whatever I've done, I have enjoyed. And when I was with government service, I don't think there was a day that I felt I did not want to come to work, even though I had problems. I love to come to work to solve problems. And I think that probably showed when I went for the interview. There were 10 people before I came to Film Negara. And I was the only one who got it. And 22 years later, I met the guy who had interviewed me. And we were on the same panel. Imagine that, huh? And I asked him, why did you choose me above all these people? He said, one, you had distinction in English we had never heard of. This was 1967. And then he said, you taught yourself. You didn't wait to be sent for a course and so on. And number three, you were doing a job called window display, which we had never heard of. At that time, Robinson's was the only department store. And we were doing art with our window display. So I read all these books from USS Library, copied a bit, and managed to get one award in Hong Kong, somehow other. So it was fun. And getting into film was probably because when I went to Film Negara, had the opportunity. And one of the good things about the Director Generals at that time, whoever wanted to do something, they gave you the chance. So I think that's the reason why probably we were given a free hand. I managed to get into film, and my first film was in 1972. It was the Christmas trailer. And then of course it developed, and then I got into live action shooting. My first live action won an award at the Sri Angkasa for Best Idea, and we shot it in the University Malaya, University Hospital for 2 days, and there was things went on from there.
What is actually film all about?
Actually, I can't tell you what film is, but when I see it, I can tell you. So, Mizoguchi, Kurosawa, Ozu, these are people who make films. Of course, you got to see what is film, what is movie. Yeah? Movies are the kind of film that is like a quickie. You want money, and you want people to enjoy, go there, no need to think. But films are in a class by themselves. To me, a good film must have these three things. Number one, it must entertain. But then, of course, you have to see, does it entertain you emotionally or intellectually? I go for both. Number two, it must have something to say. This is a silly thing that reporters always ask. What is your message? Films don't carry messages. But we have something to say. Who was it who said? Was it Scott Fitzgerald who said, it is not because the filmmaker wants to say something, but he has something to say. That is the intention. And then he creates a story, wraps it. The story is the wrapping to deliver what he wants. Number three, it must reflect the culture of a nation or a people. If these three things are there, you can say it is a film. Otherwise, it's just a movie, and you can see a lot of those movies in Malaysia at the moment, which cannot make it overseas because people can see it is so shallow and superficial.
We are still confused. There's no message in the film, and yet there is intention.
No, there are messages in a film, except that the filmmaker did not start out to send a message, but he had felt something very deeply about the subject, or he felt very strongly about an issue, and then he expressed himself in the way that he best knows, which is through film. And there are films that touch you very deeply. For instance, like Yoji Yamada is a director that's not been recognized yet, but his Twilight Samurai, you can see what he's trying to say. The word Twilight itself is already there's so much in just that one word, because Twilight means the sun setting. It can be a metaphor for people who are about to go, or it could be about the loss of something, of a tradition, something like that. But you know, André Bazin, the French film theorist who had never made a film but is very famous, he said that the cinema screen is a window through which you see the lives of others that reflect your own life. And Teguh Karya told me the same thing, the Indonesian director. He said, I put you on the screen. If you can see yourself among the characters, then I have succeeded. He's saying basically what Bazin is saying without going into this highfalutin language.
I think we're all vicious that collect things from society. And some of us want to tell stories, and we tell stories every day. Everybody tells a story. Oh, I went to the market and there was this man who was really rude to me, so I scolded him. these are stories. Our mothers tell stories, you tell stories, and you're going to put this into a video, and it's going to be a story for students to watch. But I think that in the end, perhaps some storytellers surface in society, and I hope it will happen to me one day. You surface, and suddenly people regard your stories as meaning something more than just the man who was rude to me at the market. From that point of view, I've always been a storyteller, and I have tried telling stories with painting. I've tried telling stories with poetry. I've tried telling stories with short stories, by debating, by acting, music. I've composed music, and I realize now that all I've been wanting to do is to tell a story. Even in my storytelling compulsion crept into my advertisements until people say, Yasmin, are you making commercials or are you making films? You know, you're telling grandmother stories. But it has worked from a marketing point of view, which means, for example, for Petronas, those grandmother stories I was telling in my commercials have, while other petrol companies have had their sales remain almost stagnant, Petronas has caught up and might overtake them. So which means even in the world of business, storytelling has a place. How interesting. So film I got into, I think God has things planned for me. I just flow like a log down the river. And now it's film. I never really planned to be into film. It's just the next logical thing. If my dad hadn't collapsed 2.5 years ago from diabetic complications, I wouldn't have thought to make films. I've been perfectly happy telling stories in my commercials. So what is a director? A director is just like everybody else. But like I said, perhaps some people will surface and suddenly you find them on top of a hill telling stories that people want to hear, not just grandmother stories. Maybe that's what it is, I don't know.
Qualities for a storyteller. Are there certain qualities to be you must have so that you become a good storyteller?
I'm sure there are many definitions of what a good story is or what a good storyteller is. The only definition I know is my own. When I hear a story or watch a film or listen to a song, the only thing I ask from it is that I feel its sincerity and that I'm emotionally moved by it. I laugh, I cry. I don't much go for films that make me think too much because I'm an intellectually lazy person. Don't make me think so much. But I do like feeling. But you know what? In the end, I think that feeling is advanced thinking. Just as I believe that philosophers are advanced mathematicians, musicians are advanced mathematicians. I really think that. I think that we can only calculate our way about in life for so much, and then we have to slip into philosophy and feeling. So I think that the intellect are like my arms and my legs and my mouth and my eyes. They are there to serve the purpose of my heart. So for me, emotion is key. Above all, I find God through my emotions, not by calculating. So it must be something reliable.
But
Making sense?
But if we are in the business of training future storytellers, how should we go about preparing them to become good storytellers?
I have not been in a position to have an audience of students from which I'm supposed to nurture good storytellers. But if I were in that position, I can tell you how I would do it. What I would do is look for people whose personalities tell me. I would get to know them as people first. And I think by doing that, I will know whether they have stories to tell, whether they have lived, and if they have lived in ways which interest me. And only then will I teach them the craft of storytelling. But I think most importantly that they had stories to tell. I meet people every day, and half the people I meet have nothing to tell. They have no stories to offer, and the stories they have to offer are of no interest to me. So if I had 100 students in front of me, the first thing I would do is to be their friend. I think that's how I deal with my people at work. Be their friend and discover things inside them. Usually there's something promising in everybody. God is fair. I think the people with the most interesting things are the ones who will probably pass. And I will do my best to teach them the craft of bringing out what they have inside.
Hassan, what would be a good story?
Well, I remember the quotation from Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau, the poet. He said that stand up and live before you sit down to write. That's the most important thing.
How vain it is to sit down and write before you have to start to live.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so the other day at PWTC, the Indian Film Festival, Yasmin said that she's very worried about her country because people are writing from their imagination and not from their experience, which I totally am in agreement. Just take Hemingway. Whatever he wrote about, he had experience. And I don't think anyone can become a good writer if he has not come to the age of 40. But if you have not done anything within that 40 years also is not any point, isn't it? So if from a very young age you have gone on your own, you have gone to countries or you meet people who are better than you are, there will be stories coming out from you. But if you are living in an environment which prevents or which is trapping you within this kind of environment that doesn't make you think out, which is to a certain extent is happening in Malaysia. Who was it who said that history is written by the people who are in power or something like that?
Yes.
So this is the sad part. I think this is the reason why we are not getting great stories coming out from Malaysia. Dr. Anwar Norai said that Malaysian soil is not fertile. He's using a metaphor. Because the Indians, the Chinese and the Malays who came to Malaya at that time to look for what? For food. So the philosophers never leave their countries. If they do, they are not true philosophers. So those great people never came out of their country. And the people who came here were the people who just wanted it. So what kind of mentality do you think you're going to have? We don't have great novels. We don't have great films. We are beginning to see the great films now. Why? Because the Indies are coming into the picture. And these are the people who read. So reading is so important. It may not make you a better writer, but it will not make you any worse than what you were before. At least,
can reading substitute for experience?
To a certain extent, if you read autobiographies or biographies, because once you go into the minds of people who have succeeded, you'll find that they are ordinary people like you, and this inspires you, and then it begins to reach out inside. If your writing does not come from inside, it's just coming from the 3-act structure, the plot points and so on, those are just steps. But once you have crossed the bundle and go into the house of a person, it is a totally different thing. You don't think about where you were before. So you have to also go beyond what you are. If you're just keeping to the rules, you're not going to get anywhere. Hollywood will not get anywhere if they're still using the 3-act structure. It is only when the Europeans came in the 60s that Hollywood cinema began to change because people were breaking boundaries.
Now we go into this, suddenly we are being told they are mainstream films, they are alternative films. So actually what are they? What is the difference or the similarity between mainstream and alternative?
Well, we have to have some kind of category so that people can understand, isn't it? So that you can go on to other things. Recently, I was the moderator at the Indian Film Festival. So they were talking about parallel cinema in India. So parallel cinema means it's going together with mainstream. So there are actually basically two kinds of films. One is genre, the other one is author. Genre, both are French words. Genre means a certain kind of storytelling that you can predict what's going to happen. A lot of conventions. But we can say it's mainstream cinema and alternative cinema. But in between, you have something called crossover cinema that has a little bit of the popular approach, but at the same time, something very deep is being said. And Swades by, what's the name of the director? I can't remember. Shah Rukh Khan.
Who made Lagan?
Yes. That's a very good example. And that one you can say it is seni untuk negara rather than seni untuk seni, which is the alternative cinema, like Sanctuary and so on. And to a certain extent, even Sepet, Rabon and Uwe making his films, they have one foot here, one foot here. They use some popular actors who are very recognizable and so on. So they do that for a reason. But they have something very serious that they want to get across. So you have mainstream cinema atau film arus perdana atau film popular dan film alternatif atau film peribadi yang sangat peribadi kepada pembikin filem. Tidak ada istilah film seni, film artistik, film estetik, film komersial. Film komersial itu komersial 30 second lah. Tapi academics are making a fool of themselves. They open their mouth, they put a foot inside their mouth. And wartawan hiburan pun macam tu, mengelirukan student tau. So this has got to stop lah. So I hope that people begin to understand, what is the correct istilah. Orang putih tak pernah keliru dengan istilah. Mainstream cinema uses the basic 3-act structure, but they also have the 2-act structure and the 5-act structure. 2-act structure will be Full Metal Jacket. Godfather 1 will be the 5-act. Tapi because Kubrick made it, there's also a certain element of an alternative film there. But his stories are very character motivated. Most of the Hollywood movies are plot motivated. That means first this happens, then this happens, then this happens. But in character motivated stories, what happens in the mind of the character, what the character feels, is actually creating the plot. So when Aristotle and of course Robert McKee, when they said character is plot or character is action, that means they are talking about character motivated stories. So if you can create characters that are very strong, like Piramli films, that's why his stories are so good, because the characters are very powerful. People recognize the character. They said, there's such a guy in my kampung, Haji Bakil or S. Samsudin and so on. That's why they are strong. And Sepet is very strong because of the characters. You begin to feel for the characters, and then you have got your audience. One of the things that we must recognize in mainstream cinema is the persona. In psychology, the persona is the character that you're presenting on the outside. Hollywood has taken this and placed it into the star system. So the character that they choose, Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise and so on, they can only act for certain kinds of stories. So there is the kind of convention in mainstream cinema that if you want this kind of story, you've got a 3-act structure. This is the kind of person who's got to act. So I think many of the actors in Hollywood, people like Robert Redford, they want to break away from this because they want to go into character actor punya role. So we got to differentiate all of this, and I think this is the first step before you want to get people to understand about script writing and so on.
We go straight into Sepet now. What is the main idea of Sepet?
Actually, Sepet, when I was, of course, 7-8 years ago, I had just run away from my ex-husband. I was a bit bored and a bit emotional. And then I heard about people talking about teenage love stories being a big thing in this country. And I saw some, and I thought that some of them could have been less patronizing to the audience. So I wondered to myself whether it is possible at all in this country to write a script about something as common and as everyday as teenage love story, and make it something that's more sincere and less insulting, if you like, that can be enjoyed by all people of different levels of society. So I wrote it as an attempt to see whether I can make I just wanted to write a script. I wasn't interested in making a film. Just write a script. And then I saw True Romance, script by Quentin Tarantino, directed by Tony Scott. And it's a love affair. And it's about a love story that happened instantly. And I thought, and then I reread Romeo and Juliet, because I was very bored. I was on leave for 2 weeks and away from my husband. And I realized that that people have done it for donkey's years. People have been doing teenage love stories that are so endearing, so real, so sincere, so touching, and so clever in some ways. So why can't we do it? So that's why I sat down and wrote it.
Hassan, what do you think of Sepet?
Rabun. See the word Rabun and Sepet, just one word. So Rabun, the question that I asked, siapa sebenarnya Rabun? Sepet, siapa sebenarnya Sepet? So Rabun ni macam orang mata tak apa nampak lah. Siapa yang tak apa nampak ni? It is the people who do not want to see straight lah, for both films. So Sepet to me is a major turning point in Malaysian cinema, because it has created, in fact, before the film was screened, I already put it on the internet. Here's an intelligent film that is going to create intelligent viewers. And true enough, through the feedback that I saw on the internet, not in the papers, because the papers you can't believe them. In the internet, there were people who hated it, there were people who loved it, and there were people who were somewhere in between. And there were also people who liked some, didn't like some, and they hated the ending. But in particular, I was quite surprised with one girl who wrote in, and then I took that out from Kaki Seni and put it onto the Malaysian cinema, that she was very angry at the end because the way the film was going, that they were going to get together, especially when the girl reads the letter in the car at the end, that maybe she will stop, she will go back, and so on. And then you find out that this guy, maybe he died or what, you know. And I think that made her angry. But then when she was going home, she was asking herself, why was I angry? And then she began to realize that she was angry because she got involved with the characters. That's something very difficult to do. Every filmmaker wants that. If you can only do that, you have got a hit on your hands. And Sepet will be among all those great films. And I've written about Rabun. It is about looking straight. And if you look at the opening scene and the last scene of Rabun, there's a similarity with the opening scene of Sepet and the opening at the ending. And normally in films made by thinking filmmakers, the first scene, the first few images are what the whole film is about. You check out whether it's Kurosawa or Ozu. That's how people tell stories.
So out of 10 ranking, what will you give Sepet?
Probably 11.
Wow.
Because I'm here.
No, you're right.
Behind I'll say something else.
Okay. Sepet, plot driven, character driven. Which one?
It's character driven.
It's character driven.
Yes. And you can see that many of the things are being sparked. There are sparks all over the place. Tagore, the Quran reading, which is from Yasin, and then the poetry, something said very poetically by Jason at the end of the film. So if you look at there's a very clear understanding of the use of the language of film, which is something that you cannot find in 99% of Malaysian cinema, if you can call it cinema. That's our problem. So this is why I said that this film affected many people. They didn't know why, but it is because of it being constructed. Every scene is a construct, and this is what cinema is all about. So in author approach, the structure is still there. It is still a 3-act structure, except that it is not written the way mainstream cinema is written.
You were mentioning about film language. Now we go into film language. So far, there are no good books on film language. Internet websites, you can't find film language. So what is film language?
Okay, read my book, which will come out soon.
You've been saying that for
how many years?
How many years ago? Yeah.
Wanted to write that 15 years ago. Okay, language is like using words in a certain sequence so that people can get meaning out of it. The meaning is not in the story or in what we are watching. The meaning is being constructed in the mind of the audience. So film is not subjective. It is the audience who is subjective. So every one of us brings our own sensibilities, our intellectualities, our ideologies, and our background, and so many things into play when we are watching. For instance, if you rush to see a film, you didn't have time for lunch, and in the film, a lot of the scenes have scenes where they are eating. You'll have a different opinion of the film at the end. If you have someone who had a good lunch, he came to see this film, and he saw people eating, he would have a totally different opinion about it. So in 1912, this group of guys called Gestalt psychologists, they investigated how do people get meaning out of films. So they came up with this a lot of things that they put down on paper, saying that everything is organized and patterned. Back to film language, every shot is one unit, but the shots must be in relation. Shot B must be related to shot A and shot 3 as C, and of course these few shots are also related to all the other shots who are coming at the back. As an example, in Sepet, the opening sequence is of a mother and her son, and then we hear the VO of the girl. At the end of the film, it is a daughter and her mother, and we hear the VO of the girl. So you can see that this has been constructed in such a way that after you see the film, you feel satisfied because the gestalt is good. So the gestalt psychologist said everything is patterned and organized, and films are a very good example of this. If you don't have patterning and organization, when you come out, you feel, what happened? There's something wrong with this film. They cannot figure it out. That means the gestalt was not there.
Completeness was not.
Yes, the completeness was not there.
For Yasmin, to you, what is film language?
Actually, I haven't the faintest
Idea.
I suppose it's a way of telling your story on this medium called film, a way of rousing people's emotions and thoughts, I suppose, with this medium called film, and how you put things together. I suppose that's what language is, how you compose sounds. To start with, what is the etymology of language? I suppose sounds to give meaning, to make somebody understand you. I had never studied film, not in a formal way. I just watch. Sometimes when I'm watching, for example, I remember when I was watching Not One Less by Zhang Yimou, I was surrounded by sniffing Chinese who were crying. So I tried to remember the scenes that they cried at, and I was crying as well. So when I bought the DVD, I took it home, I rewound to exactly the right place where people were just sniffing all around me. And I looked and I thought, okay, from a story point of view, what's happening in this scene? And this scene is meaningful because of what happened before, and it will become more meaningful presumably because of what happens after. How did he shoot this? Where was the camera? Where were the actors? Who did he focus at? Did he focus on the person who was talking or the person who was not talking? All these small things that I had to go through because I had no film background. But it wasn't really a difficult thing for me because I was fascinated. It was just another means of making people feel what you want them to feel. So at that point, Zhang Yimou, along with the writer and all the filmmakers that were working with him, made me feel a particular way. And not just me, I was surrounded by people who felt in almost exactly the same way. And for me, he applied the right language, and so I studied it. So I steal the language of films that are hailed as art films. I steal from films that are hailed as B-grade films. I think there is something to steal from in any film. In fact, it's better to steal from B-grade films because people have forgotten them. So when you apply it and give it a new flavor, people say you're being inventive. Actually, you just stole from B-grade films.
The film is a very unusual art. It is the only art which takes from every other art and then it creates something new. And what do you call? It is how do you say it? It is totally dependent on the cinematic apparatus, on technical elements to get that art across. And if you don't master this shot size, like in cinematography, you always have to decide camera position from the front, from the back, from the side, and so on. If from the front you are saying this character is okay, the moment you introduce a character from the back, you are saying something is wrong with this character, because we must see the face of the person. Then only we are sure who is this person. So if you want to contrast, Claude Levi-Strauss, the structural anthropologist, he said that everything is made up of binary opposites. If you want to tell a clear story, you have to have opposites. If the hero, this is the way he must be dressed, this is the way he must look. If he's the bad guy, this is the way he must look. And Hollywood and Bollywood have mastered this. Then you must know about your shot size, whether you want to take a close-up or a long shot. Then you got to know your camera angle, above eye level, below eye level, above high angle, and so on. Then you got to know whether you want to move your camera or not. Ozu in Tokyo Story, there are only two places where he moved the camera in the entire 2-hour movie, and that is when they are walking outside. Otherwise, his cameras, the camera does not move, the actor do not move. How can you make a film like that? And he made a classic. Then you got to know about the lighting. If you have a person who is lit full compared to a person whose face is only half lighted, you're saying something is wrong with this person, something negative. Now the audience doesn't understand this, but they can feel it, especially when you go from one shot to the other shot. This is why I say it's images, not shots. We are using shots, but we are creating images. And these images create something in the subconscious of the audience, and this is what you have to understand, which is the psychology of the audience. And in psychology, you have so many things. Persona is the first thing, what you present outside. And Eisenstein spoke about this as typage. He will not shoot a film unless he gets the character that he wants. Because the moment the character appears on screen, you already know more or less what this character is. A good guy, a bad guy, he's got problems on his mind, and so on. So this is why casting is very important.
Where I learned if you like the rhythm of my film, if you don't, then it doesn't matter. But if you do sense a certain rhythm, I learned a lot of the rhythm by reading poetry, and by watching paintings, and by looking at photojournalism. I find these three things affect me the most. I mean, also music. But the thing about poetry is there is a rhythm to the way things are said. That if said differently, if the meter is gone, if you like, then the feeling will go. Haiku, particularly, although I speak very little Japanese, I only can read from the English translations. But there is care being put while translating to be faithful to the rhythm of haiku or of poetry, and that is the measure of whether or not translation is good or not. So I learned from that rhythm somehow. And from painting, particularly from Rembrandt, for me, because I used to pick up a lot of books on Rembrandt. I learned about how why did Rembrandt paint and make that lady go near the window and then everything else is dark, and Goya, for example, why were the soldiers or the people who were wounded in one corner and then other things are above them? And I always felt that these were never by accident. I always knew that if they had changed things around, the feeling would have been different. Why did Gauguin put those two brown women in? It's slightly askew. Why didn't he put them right in the center? And I even did things like construct squares and make it go center, and I could feel that the feeling was different. So these are the things that go into the making of my film. Music also, and for example, it's always there's a B-grade film which I really like called where Demi Moore was the wife of Woody Harrelson, and he had to sell his wife for money.
Which is
No. It's a B-grade film. And there's one part where he changed his mind. I no longer want to sell my wife. I know I've got $1 million that we really need in indecent proposal. And it's a B-grade film. You know, it's a B-grade film. And then, of course, at some point he decides, what am I doing? I'm giving my wife away for $1 million. I know we talked about it, but this is bad. So he chased. He ran and on the way up the stairs to get to the roof of the building where the helicopter was, so that he can give chase. And of course, this very fast handheld camera following Woody Harrelson, running after his wife in a panic. But in the hands, in the hands of an ordinary musician, this would have been fast-paced music to portray panic. But in the hands of a genius like John Barry, who has done music for Lion in Winter, Out of Africa, Dances with Wolves, Born Free, this was something else. He made this really slow, pining, adagio-like music to accompany this state of panic. And suddenly, the emotions were just treble, quadruple, and so I watched this scene over and over and over again. There's another B-grade film. John Schlesinger was, of course, once very great, and much later in his life, I think he's dead now, I think. Before he died, made crap films like An Eye for an Eye, about a mother whose daughter got raped and murdered, and he took up kung fu and whatever it is to revenge. But there's one scene at the beginning when she was on the phone with the daughter saying, I'm on my way back. The daughter said, hang on, Mom, I'm making the cake, but there's somebody at the door. And she opened and she could hear her daughter being beaten up by whoever came to the door. And I was just watching, cutting back to Sally Fields and the daughter being beaten up, cutting back to Sally Fields, going down this road, saying somebody lend me another phone. And the way it was edited, was just nothing short of ingenious. So I watched that Be Great film and learned what would be, how to perhaps heighten a state of panic even before you do anything else.
So it's not just watching, feeling and thinking.
And not just film, because like Hassan said, film is such an eclectic art that brings together various art forms to produce a new art form. I think some people say that film is the ultimate art form, for now anyway, because it brings in everything. And I'm glad that I in the making of my films, that I have drawn experiences from all aspects of my life.